realistically, I just do not need 2 rowing machines in my apartment, and I honestly just have to make a decision between the Wave and the Hydrow, and I think after using both of them, I've made a decision of which one I am going to keep long term, and I think that is going to be... If you're in the market for a new rowing machine or you want to expand your home gym, there is a new option that just became available from Hydrow. Hydrow just released their Wave, which is a new rowing machine that's less expensive, smaller, lighter weight than the original Hydrow, which I tried out for the first time a little over a year ago. So if you want to hear everything that I think you need to know to make a decision on which of these 2 rowing machines is the right fit for you, or is either of these the right fit for you, then stay tuned. I'm going to go through all the details. Gordon's favorite part of the Hydrow is you can look at water without having to actually touch it. +1. Full disclosure, Hydrow did send me both of these machines to try out and compare for you guys. However, I would never agree to do a review where I could not fully share my honest pros and cons, and Hydrow is giving me full go ahead to share really all of my honest opinions of both of these devices. I have an affiliate link down in the description box for either of these machines that supports me a ton when you use that link. I also have a discount available for the original Hydrow. Unfortunately, I don't have anything as far as a discount goes yet for the Wave, but check that description box because if anything changes, I will put the latest down below. The Wave is a little bit different than the original Hydrow when it comes to the delivery. So with the original Hydrow, it's shipped through a freight carrier. So basically you schedule a 4-hour delivery window and then someone comes during that window to deliver it, and then you can pay extra for in-home setup. The Wave is different because it just ships through the regular mail and it ships in this giant box. So it's convenient because you don't have to be home, you don't have to schedule a delivery window and wait for a time that the delivery courier is available and all of that. The only negative I would say with the delivery is the box is really heavy, so you're definitely going to want another person to help you if you need to move the box anywhere like upstairs or anything like that. Definitely get some help for that. I kind of wish they shipped this in 2 different boxes so it was a little bit easier to handle, but I think as long as you have someone to help you, you should be totally fine. Now, I was a little bit intimidated by the assembly process because I have never assembled any type of workout equipment before, but overall the process was actually really pretty easy. There's really only 2 main pieces that make up the body of the Wave, and then there's kind of a neck piece that attaches to the screen, and then there is the screen monitor itself, and then there's a few smaller things like you have to attach the footrest and the seat and that type of thing. Even though I was by myself building this and I was adjusting the camera and filming the whole process, it only took me an hour and 15 minutes to build the entire thing. However, with the assembly, unfortunately, there were 2 small pieces of damage basically that I did run into with the components. So with that part, there was unfortunately a bit of plastic on the bottom that ended up being kind of like disfigured, but ultimately it just meant that the bottom piece, the foot pads, could not sit flush against this component. And at first I didn't think it was that big of a deal until I got everything pretty much done and I realized that the Wave was wobbling a little bit when I tried to use it, and I was like, something is definitely wrong here. It should not be wobbling like this. If you're in the situation, definitely make sure that the foot pads are able to securely screw onto the main piece. That will prevent any wobbling. But I would definitely say if you run into this problem, contact Hydrow customer service. Regular customer service responded within just a few hours. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you have to. And then unfortunately, there was another small issue where basically I got this error message when I was ready to start rowing that said that the cords were not securely attached, or there was a loose cord. And this I could not figure out for the life of me. I tried unplugging, replugging, restarting, do a factory reset. Thankfully, again, the Hydrow team was really, really responsive and they were able to help me with actually a new screen to fix this issue like super quickly. So long story short, the actual assembly process was really pretty easy other than those few hiccups. I think this is a new product, so there could be some small growing pains. I tried the product before it was even publicly released, so it's definitely possible that my version is not the exact same version. They're able to fix some of these bugs before it's fully launched to everyone. In addition to the delivery process, there's also some other really key differences between these 2 machines. So Let's walk through that now. The TLDR version is the Hydrow Wave, which is the new Hydrow, is lighter weight. It's about 30% lighter and smaller than the original Hydrow. And it's also a lot less expensive. It's about $1,000 less expensive. So you can get the Wave for about $1,500 and the original Hydrow is about $2,500. The other big difference between the original Hydrow and the Wave is the Wave is really meant for small spaces, and it is just a smaller and more compact rowing machine. And it's also designed more easily to be able to store vertically. So if you are someone who lives in a small space like I do, then you're probably going to appreciate the Wave for its kind of smaller scale and ability to be stored vertically, which definitely makes it a lot easier if you're trying to store it out of sight while you're not using it and kind of clear up that floor space when it's not in use. The other main difference between the two rowing machines is the screen. So with the original Hydrow, you have a bigger screen. Also, the screen does move from side to side. It also rotates kind of up and down. So you do have a little bit more versatility with the original Hydrow screen. Also, if you are someone who really wants to take advantage of the floor classes, the yoga classes, Pilates, other things that Hydrow has to offer in addition to the rowing classes, then the original Hydrow may be a better fit for you because you can turn the screen to more easily be able to do yoga and things like that off to the side versus only having the screen straight forward, which may make it a little bit more difficult to do those other floor workouts. On the other hand, the Wave does have a little bit of smaller screen. Also, the Wave screen doesn't move at all. You can't rotate it to the side. However, if you are someone who doesn't really care about doing the floor classes, then the Wave could be a really good option because you can save about $1,000 by going with this model. So those are the most obvious differences between the original Hydrow and the Wave, but the more I actually used both of these machines, I started to notice a few smaller, more subtle differences. So now let's get into those details. So the first part of the Wave is just this seat, and it's a very standard rowing seat, and I feel like the smoothness of the ride, so to speak, is a little bit smoother on the original Hydrow. So on this side we have the original Hydrow, and listen to it. I feel like it's a little bit more smooth, whereas the Wave sounds like this. Oops. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a little bit more of like a choppy sound, almost like, it's almost reminiscent of riding on like a wooden roller coaster or something, where there's like a little bit of that like clipping sound. I don't think I would have noticed it unless I tried it out side by side with the original Hydrow. But I feel like the Wave is just not quite as smooth as the original Hydrow in terms of like the seats, like just kind of being more of a smooth ride. I feel like it just moves around a little bit more on the Wave versus the original Hydrow that just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's just attached more securely or something, but even when I do this, it doesn't sound as loud versus. Now, I don't think this is a deal breaker, but I think if you want to kind of have the most premium experience, the original Hydrow is probably going to be a little bit better in terms of how smooth everything feels. Next, I'm gonna try out the loudness of the actual rowing. I'm gonna try to do a few strokes on each of these machines. I'm not gonna do a class, so there's not the noise of the instructor, but let's try it out. Okay, so I tried 5 sample strokes on the Wave, and the average decibel was 62 and the max was 71. So I feel like not too bad, but let's try it out on the original Hydrow to see how it compares. Okay, so I just did 5 sample strokes on the original Hydrow, and the original Hydrow is actually louder. It's average of 65 decibels and a max of 73. Personally though, I think it's kind of like an interesting trade-off because I think the original Hydrow, the sound is a little bit more pleasant. It's just a little bit more of like a smoother sound, similar to being on the water, versus I think the Wave is a little bit less pleasant of a sound, but technically it is less loud. So something I wanted to point out. So that covers really the main differences between the Hydrow and the Wave, all of the major differences that I could pick up anyway. So now let's move on to some of the similarities and some of the overlapping features between the Hydrow and the Wave. So the first thing is, of course, the workout itself. Both of these are rowing machines. You're going to get the same type of great cardio workout on either of these machines. Also, with either option, you will have access to the exact same library of classes, and generally the software is literally exactly the same. And if you want to know more details on my thoughts of the software, the classes, all of that, definitely check out my original Hydrow review where I go into a lot more detail about all of that. But I do want to walk through just a high-level overview of the software, what you can expect on the screen if you buy a Wave. So let's get into it. When you first open up your Hydrow, you're taken to this intro welcome screen, and then you select a profile to row from. So if you have multiple people in your family, you can all share the same Hydrow or the same Wave and just create different accounts to track your progress. So I'm gonna click on my profile. Then when you get into your profile page, you're taken to the home screen, and on the home screen, basically it's going to have some recommended rows that you can do. It's going to show you the upcoming live rows that are happening, as well as some featured rows. It'll show the different athletes that you can take workouts from, some popular rows, as well as some getting started. This is really useful if you haven't really rowed before and you're just trying to get used to some of the mechanics and all of that. The next screen is the library screen, and this one, I would say my biggest nitpick about the library screen is I feel like it could be improved in terms of finding classes. There's no like open-ended search bars. So if you remember like the name of a row, you can't type that in order to find it. You have to just go through these different kind of search options. But basically through this, you can choose the athlete, the duration, workout type, workout style, and location. So the next screen, we have the progress screen, where basically you can see a calendar of all the days that you've rowed. You can see kind of like your lifetime stats and stuff like that. So one thing that is really cool is if you do have a Hydrow already and you do want to switch to the Wave, all of your information is saved, which I think is really great. So it's not like you're starting fresh if you already have racked up some miles on the Hydrow. And then we have the profile tab, which just has kind of like your personal information on it. Then we have the help tab. This is just like kind of helpful things and tutorials of like how to set your drag, how to row, stuff like that. And then finally, you have the settings page that has kind of some more boring things, but you can like set up your Wi-Fi and all of that stuff from here. And of course, the other major similarity between the Hydrow and the Wave is the workouts. So both the Hydrow and the Wave, as I said, have access to the exact same workouts. And what I would say is the main differentiating factor of Hydrow's workouts versus other types of connected fitness devices is the fact they really lean on being out in nature. Pretty much all of their classes are filmed outside on the water. They're filmed from someone actually rowing themselves as they're talking to you, which is super unique. Pretty much every other fitness device that I've tried has studio filmed classes, which are totally fine, but it's just not quite as interesting as seeing the instructor actually live on the water where there's other boats in the background. It's just a little bit more interesting, in my opinion, than other competitors out there. The only downside I would say is sometimes because they are filming outside, I would say in general, the audio quality, the filming quality is not quite as good. Like I've had more issues with like audio disruptions and things like that than I have with other devices because it's not a kind of sterile quote unquote environment. Personally, it doesn't bother me too much, but just something to keep in mind. And then the final similarity that I do want to point out is both the Hydrow and the Wave have the exact same membership fee. So Hydrow charges a $38 monthly membership fee, which gets you access to all of these different workouts. And even though the cost of the Wave is less expensive, the ongoing cost is going to be the same. So keep that in mind. The classes are exactly the same. So no matter where you're accessing them, the cost is going to be the same as well. So for my high level recommendation between the two models, I would say the original Hydrow is probably going to be better for you if you want to use the Hydrow all the time. If you're fine just having it out all the time, and you also really want to take advantage of the floor classes, and you have the money to invest in a little bit more substantial of a product, then I think the original Hydrow is probably the way to go. However, if you want to save some money, if you want something that's a little bit smaller, lighter weight, maybe you live in an apartment and you want to be able to store the rowing machine standing up, then I think the Wave is probably going to be the way to go for you. I think both of them are really, really great options. Realistically, I just do not need 2 rowing machines in my apartment, and I honestly just have to make a decision between the Wave and the Hydrow. And I think after using both of them, I've made a decision of which one I am going to keep long term. And I think that is going to be the Wave. I think the Wave is just a better fit for me, where I live, my apartment, and just my usage of the Hydrow and the Wave. So I try to row relatively frequently, like a few times a week, but even that, still only using the Hydrow max a few hours a week. So the ability to very easily store the Wave vertically is honestly kind of a game changer. And I noticed as soon as I stored it vertically, I was like, wow, my office where I have my rowing machine looks so much bigger. But yeah, I think that's where I'm leaning right now. I would love to know which way you are leaning if you're considering both the Hydrow and the Wave. Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see my original Hydrow review, check that out. It has a lot more details about the software and some of the things that are more common to both the Hydrow and the Wave that I didn't touch on in this video. And until next time, bye.